Harry! We've just been to the shops. You want to come see what we've got? I'm really sorry, but you can't eat any of it. It'll make you super sick. Good boy, Harry. Alright, Harry. The groceries are unpacked, and now I get to tell you why you can't eat any of them. First, we've got some chocolate. Now, I know you'd like it very much, but it's actually really bad for you. It contains theobromine and caffeine, which are both relatives of each other, and they'll cause muscle stimulation and central nervous system stimulation, which will potentially present as a dog having seizures. No, you don't get to shake for it, Harry. You're a good boy. Can present as a dog having seizures or an irregular heartbeat or muscle tremors, but it's also very fatty, and that can cause things like gastroenteritis, even if they don't have a toxic dose. Now, it is very dose dependent, and you have to eat a fair amount to be poisoned. So 1 or 2 M&Ms is not going to do it to you. But the darker the chocolate is, the more toxic it is. So for a dog's Harry's size, he'd have to eat about this much dark chocolate, which you totally would. I know you would. But for a smaller dog, it would potentially take much, much less. Now, we'll often see chocolate toxicity around Christmas time, when people optimistically wrap them in paper under the tree, and the dog doesn't care, so it just eats every single piece available, packages and all. Now, next we have one of my least favourite toxins. Onions. Now, if you ate both of these, Harry, you would die from an acute hemolytic crisis, because these onions contain a poison that will cause oxidative damage to your red blood cells. And 2 onions isn't a whole lot, but that's enough to kill a 35-kilo dog like Harry. A smaller dog needs a lot less. And onions are a little bit special because they don't have to eat these all in one go. They can eat a small amount over a longer period of time and still get the toxicity. Related to that is one of my pet hates, which is garlic. Now, I love garlic in human food, and if you ever read a recipe that calls for enough garlic to kill a dog, it's about this much. People will use it to treat all sorts of imaginary things that it just doesn't work for, but chronic exposure can also cause acute anemias. Do you want it, Harry? I know you do. You're a Labrador. You'd eat everything. Now, one of the weirdest poisons to come out of Australia, and believe me folks, we have lots of them, is macadamia nuts. Macadamia nuts are eaten by people quite happily, but in dogs, for a weird reason, it causes ascending paralysis. It can be as little as 10 nuts, which is quite easy for a dog like Harry to eat, and it will cause this paralysis that starts at the back end and works its way up to the front end, kind of like a tick toxin does. And I don't know exactly what causes it, just that it does. Fortunately, most cases can be treated supportively, and they usually recover well. Grapes and raisins and sultanas and things that contain them, like wine, are another weird toxicity when it comes to dogs. We don't know exactly what the active ingredient is, but it causes unpredictable kidney failure from ischemic injury, with really not very many. So if Harry was one of these unfortunate dogs that does react to them, this would be enough to wreck his kidneys. And about half of poisoned dogs will actually die from it. Now, we don't know which dogs react, whether it's a genetic thing or whether it's something in the grapes, like a fungus on the skin or something in the juice that causes it. Also, don't forget, traditional hot cross buns also contain raisins, so they count as well. Now, Thank you, Harry. Yeast dough will also cause toxicity in dogs. And it's not the wheat or the gluten or the yeast itself, it's the byproducts that it makes. So fermenting yeast will produce ethanol, which is toxic. But it will also expand, producing carbon dioxide and potentially causing the stomach to bloat. And because it's all sticky and, well, doughy, it's really hard for that dog to get it out. And so some of them will require surgical removal, which is a bit ridiculous for someone that just wanted to bake their own bread. Now you might have heard of xylitol, which is in lots of sugar-free products these days, of which chewing gum is probably the most common and the most concentrated. Xylitol will cause hypoglycemia, and in some cases it will cause liver failure, and has quite a high mortality rate. Xylitol is a natural product and can be found in things like berries at a very low dose, but in chewing gum it's found at quite a high concentration, and it takes about 10 to 15 pieces to kill a dog of Harry's size, which is about 1 packet. Now, Harry is a Labrador and he could eat this handful of gum in 3 seconds flat, but if that contains xylitol, that would be potentially enough to put him in hospital, and he might not get out of hospital. Dogs will raid handbags to get to this. Now, ethanol is the alcohol that humans indulge in recreationally, and we don't usually see dogs poisoned by it because most people are not silly enough to make them drink it. However, it can happen. It is toxic to dogs. Technically, it's toxic to you too. And they might get it from drinks that humans have left around or encouraged them to drink, or sometimes from rotten fruit under fruit trees. It does take quite a lot to cause an acutely lethal dose. So about this much spirit is what it would take to, well, kill Harry acutely. Not that I think you'd really drink that given the choice. But smaller doses can still cause complications, including respiratory depression and potentially vomiting and inhaling it. The flesh of stone fruit is actually alright in moderation, but the distinguishing feature of these fruits is that they have this pip, this stone in the middle. And while it contains cyanide, that's rarely a problem in practice because most dogs won't crunch it. But if they eat enough of them, or they're a small enough dog, these stones can cause intestinal obstruction that requires surgery. Now, Harry steals them off the fruit tree all the time and he will poop out little pits. But a small dog like a terrier is not going to be so lucky. Avocados get a special mention because their pit is big enough to cause an obstruction in just about everything. But the flesh also contains persin, which is toxic to a lot of herbivores. It's less toxic to dogs, but it can still make them vomit. Plus the fat can potentially set off pancreatitis, which is way more mess than you want to deal with. And lastly, fatty foods. Fatty foods are fine in moderation, but dogs are not known for eating in moderation, and they will happily eat an entire packet, or 2, or 3, if given the opportunity. Wouldn't you, Harry? Yeah, I know you would. I know. Problem is, too much fat in one go can induce gastroenteritis, and that's probably the most common reason I see it for in the vet practice. But it will also induce pancreatitis, which is kind of like gastro but worse, causing a lot more pain, nausea, and potentially causing dogs to become diabetic, either temporarily or permanently. They can die of pancreatitis, and typically they become increasingly sensitive to the fat in their diet as they get older. So middle-aged dogs are more prone to it than younger dogs. Most commonly we'll see a really bad case after someone has a party on the weekend and they just chuck all the leftovers to the dog, who greedily eats absolutely all of it and then is sick as the proverbial dog the next day. So moderation is key here. And that means you have to enforce it because the dog certainly can't. Speaking of moderation, Harry, you have been so good. You have been so good. Harry, you didn't eat any of the things you're not supposed to. You're our best boy. You're our good boy. You ready? This is for you, okay? For you. Good boy, Harry. Who's our good boy? Oh, good boy, Harry. Good boy, Harry. Harry, wag your tail. Good boy. Good boy, Harry. Good boy.